All right, we're about to dive into one of the weirdest, most stubborn case files in American history. I mean, this is a story about a wild heist, a hijacker who was basically a ghost, and a mystery that had the FBI scratching their heads for more than 50 years. So let's get right into it. Okay, so picture this. It's November 24th, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving. You know how it is. Airports are packed, everyone's trying to get home to their families. Everything is just totally normal. But on this one short flight leaving Portland to Oregon, normal was about to get thrown right out the window. And that really brings us to the big question, right? The one that's been bugging investigators for decades. How on earth does a person, and let's not forget $200,000 in cash, just poof, vanish from a plane while it's in the middle of the sky? So where does this whole thing start? Well, not with a bang, but with this really quiet guy in a dark suit. He walks up to the counter, checks in under the name Dan Cooper. And here's a fun little fact right off the bat. The media messed it up, called him DB Cooper, and for whatever reason, that's the name that went down in history. Anyway, he grabs his seat, 18E, and nobody gives him a second look. You know, what's so wild is just how normal he looked. Mid-40s, wearing a plain suit, a black clip-on tie. I mean, he was basically invisible. He could have been any other businessman on that flight. Paid $20 in cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle. It's almost like he was a ghost before he even did anything. So the question is, how does this totally anonymous guy turn into the mastermind behind one of the boldest skyjackings ever? Well, that quiet flight was about to get a major interruption. Yeah, so not long after they take off, he passes a note to one of the flight attendants. And at first, she just kind of dismisses it, probably thought he was giving her his phone number or something. But then he leans in and really calmly whispers, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." And just like that, the hijacking was on. And this is where the story gets really interesting. So he's just told someone he has a bomb on a plane. What's his next move? He flags down the flight attendant and orders a bourbon and soda. He even pays for it and tried to give her a tip. It's that absolute, unbelievable coolness that kind of started to turn him from just another criminal into this, this American folk legend. His demands were super specific. He wanted $200,000, which you gotta remember was a ton of money back then. And here's the weird part, 4 parachutes. But why 4? Was he planning to take a hostage with him? Was it a bluff? Or was he just hedging his bets, making sure at least one of them would work? Honestly, it's a question nobody's ever been able to answer. So they land in Seattle, the authorities meet his demands, and Cooper lets all the passengers go. But this thing was far from over. In fact, the most dangerous part of his whole plan was still to come. I mean, just think about the conditions he was jumping into. He made the pilots fly low and slow, sure, but he was about to leap into a freezing thunderstorm at night over some of the gnarliest wilderness in the entire country. This wasn't just some risky jump. It was basically him betting his life against impossible odds. And then, somewhere over Washington state, he did it. He walked to the back of the plane, lowered the rear air stair, something you could do on those old 727s, and just stepped out into the pitch-black storm. He was gone. The only things he left behind were his clip-on tie and that half-empty glass of bourbon. So, Cooper might have vanished from the plane, but he was about to become the star of one of the longest, most massive manhunts the FBI has ever launched. Right away, the FBI kicked off Operation Norjack. That's short for Northwest Hijacking. And believe me, this wasn't just some minor case file. It became a full-blown obsession for the agency that lasted for almost 50 years. We're talking thousands of agents, following up on leads that almost always went absolutely nowhere. Yeah, this timeline really tells the story, doesn't it? Right after the jump, huge ground searches turn up nothing. Not a body, not a parachute, not the money. Then complete silence for 9 years. A whole 9 years, until this one little clue pops up in 1980. And after that, decades more of nothing, until the FBI basically threw in the towel and suspended the active case in 2016. So out of that entire $200,000, this is all they ever found. Just under $6,000. It was basically 3 bundles of rotting $20 bills that some kid found while digging in the sand on a riverbank. But finding it didn't solve anything. In fact, it just made the mystery even deeper. Like, how did that money get there? And more importantly, where was the rest of it? But look, just because the trail went cold doesn't mean people stopped talking about it. Oh no. Over the years, tons of theories have popped up, and a few main suspects have kind of floated to the top of the list. We've got guys like Richard McCoy, who was a skydiver and actually pulled off a very similar hijacking just a few months after Cooper's. Then there's Sheridan Peterson, who worked at Boeing and was a known daredevil. And you can't forget Robert Rackstraw, the special ops vet, who kind of seemed to get a kick out of teasing investigators about it. But for all these interesting characters, there's never been enough solid proof to say, yep, that's our guy. So with no body, almost all the money gone, and no real prime suspect, the guy the world knows as D.B. Cooper didn't just escape the law, he jumped right out of that plane and straight into American folklore. Which really just leaves us with two big possibilities, and they couldn't be more different. On one hand, did he totally botch the jump and die out there in the freezing wilderness with his money lost forever? Or did the guy who planned every other detail so perfectly actually pull it off? Did he walk away from that jump and live out his life quietly with all that stolen cash? And when you get right down to it, that's his legacy. There was a whole wave of copycat hijackings back then, but D.B. Cooper is in a league of his own. He is the only one who was never identified and never caught. It's the perfect crime, and it's still unsolved. And so here we are, more than 50 years later, and we're pretty much right back where the FBI started, asking the same exact question. Who was that quiet man in the dark suit? Was he some kind of brilliant criminal mastermind, a total amateur who got incredibly lucky? Or was he just a ghost who fell out of the sky and disappeared into the night? It seems like the answer is still out there, lost somewhere in the darkness.